Tonight on First at 9, this Tuesday, the 28th of May 2024. Postpone elections. Request to postpone presidential election comes under fire, but minister affirms government stance. Parliamentarians, however, question threat to democracy.
That will be the final nail in the coffin of democracy in this country if such efforts are taken.
External debt. Private debt restructuring to complete soon, confirms central bank governor. Financial regulator expects market rates to further come down in line with policy interest rates.
We are emphasizing that we would like to see the transmission faster.
Take over. Government on the lookout to take over poorly managed regional plantations. Labour Minister questions contributions of plantations towards employee funds. Weather havoc. President directs immediate relief to those impacted by the adverse weather as heavy rains and strong winds leave thousands affected across Sri Lanka.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දෙනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
From Derana, this is Derana First at 9 with Indivadi Amuata. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
A very warm welcome. You're joining us tonight on First at 9 with the very latest from across Sri Lanka and around the world. We take you straight to your top stories, and in your development news, government expresses plans to take over regional plantation companies that cannot pay their workers the government mandated minimum daily wage of 1,700 rupees. However, the Cabinet of Ministers approved the proposal to settle arrears of the statutory allowances of Sri Lanka State Plantation Corporation, Janata Estate Development Board and Lanka Plantation Company Limited via loans from the Treasury. In the meantime, questions have been raised about plantation companies' contributions towards the Employees Provident Fund and the Employees Trust Fund amid their refusal to implement the minimum daily wage.
Sri Lanka increased the daily wage of estate workers to 1,700 rupees from 1,000 rupees. According to a gazette published, the minimum daily wage of tea and rubber estate workers was set at 1,350 rupees, while the special productivity allowance was set at 350 rupees, bringing the total minimum daily wage to 1,700 rupees. Following a 15-day period for the submission of objections, the wage increase was made mandatory via a new Gazette notification with effect from the 21st of May. Against this backdrop, the Planters Association of Ceylon, holding a media briefing yesterday, said plantation companies refused to implement the wage hike and comply with the government's decision in view of the high cost of production. Meanwhile, Cabinet spokesperson Dr. Bandula Gunawardena during the Cabinet media briefing today reiterated government plans to terminate contracts of regional plantation companies that are currently leasing state-owned lands and are unable to pay its workers the daily minimum wages.
Last week, the President notified the Cabinet that he has instructed the Secretary to the President and the Secretary to the Ministry of Finance to form committees to probe this issue regarding the state worker wage hike. These committees will investigate whether these companies who claim that they are unable to pay wage hike cannot truly do so, and if they are unable to pay because of management issues, they will probe the possibility for government to take over those plantations. We will take a decision once the committees submit their reports.
However, the Cabinet of Ministers today granted approval to settle the arrears of the statutory allowances of the Sri Lanka State Plantation Corporation, Janata Estate Development Board and the Lanka Plantation Company Limited with funds from the Treasury. The loan amount will be repaid to the Treasury in installments from earnings of those companies. After the payment of the arrears of the statutory allowances, the Commissioner General of Labour has been instructed to reduce the maximum amount that can be deducted from the surcharges to be paid by the companies in accordance with the provisions of the Employees Provident Fund. Meanwhile, speaking to media at the Presidential Media Centre, Minister of Labour and Foreign Employment Manusha Nanayakara stated that he has instructed the Department of Labour to investigate whether small-scale plantation companies were making regular payments to the Employees Provident Fund and the Employee Trust Fund on behalf of their workers.
There are about 400,000 small-scale tea plantation owners in Sri Lanka. I have instructed the Department of Labour to investigate whether they have made EPF and ETF payments on behalf of their workers. Only 78,000 companies have registered themselves and their employees for EPF and ETF, which means small-scale tea plantations have not done so.
Crunchy goodness for hunger on the go.
ජීවිතේ හැම තැනකදීම ස්මාර්ට් වෙන්න. පොලිය විතරක් ගෙවාගෙන යන්න. CDB Smart Draft.
Highlighting that the discussions on debt restructuring are progressing well, Central Bank Governor Dr. Nandalal Vedasinghe expressed confidence in completing the restructuring of private debt without any delay. Further, the central bank chief is of the view that the market interest rates should reduce further and that he expects the relevant reductions to provide people by the financial institutions soon. The central bank governor made these comments while addressing media to announce the monetary policy stance of the central bank. At the monetary policy board meeting of the central bank, its members have decided to maintain the standing deposit facility rate and the standing lending facility rate of the central bank at their current levels of 8.50% and 9.50% respectively.
What is Sri Lanka's progress with regards to restructuring of private creditor debt?
We have been discussing through our advisors and their advisors. Negotiations and discussion are going on. We hope we can complete the process without much delay. So that's making good progress.
In your opinion, what's the reason that the banks are very slow to reduce the interest rates?
It has been coming down significantly, but still not aligned with our policy rates and normal monetary policy cycles. I think if you look at the monetary policy cycles, in a cycle of policy easing, transmission happens with a time lag. That's where we have seen some of the rates basically policy have been transmitted to the policy rates faster. This is a usual kind of transmission process, and the transmission happens, it takes a longer time, especially when it comes to market lending rates. The private sector, that's one of the reasons I think is that market lending by the banks to the private sector depends on not only the policy rate reduction but also several other factors like demand for credit by the private sector is one reason. Other one is some of the other risk factors, the pricing and their lending. And also earlier there was a claim that the repricing deposits are the one of the reasons why they are so late, but I think what we can see now, repricing of deposits has already happened, so deposit rates have been adjusted. I think they have still room. We are emphasizing that we would like to see the transmission faster, especially what we see usually in the easing cycles, market rates downward is a little more rigid than in the upward cycle. So we hope that this is why we thought we give some more time for that race to adjust.
There have been a few analysts and economists who said that perhaps Sri Lanka's GDP has more potential. So do you feel that this accommodative monetary stance is enough for growth to catch up by the first quarter of 2025?
Yeah, this is why we have revised our growth predictions for this year as we predicted in our annual economic review for this year to be 3%. It's positive 3% for an average is higher than others kind of estimate of potential growth, but still it's not growing at 3% on annual year-on-year basis. I think we within this monetary policy this will certainly help catch up, but it is the monetary policy is not necessarily it's not the objective of monetary policy to promote growth, but is to stabilize and facilitate for the country to achieve the potential growth, whatever levels. And then there are a lot of other policies will have to take place to enhance growth in the medium to long term. So that's other policies also will have support and have confidence all these things will happen. Then I'm sure we have a potential is much higher than what we see now.
Samurdhi community-based banks and Samurdhi community-based banking societies will be brought under government audit according to a latest government decision. Government says the move will help maintain transparency and improve public confidence. Meanwhile, a voluntary retirement scheme will be implemented to enable the merger of Ceylon Fertilizer Company Limited and Colombo Commercial Fertilizer Company Limited at a cost of 844 million rupees and is subject to recommendations by a committee studying the retirement of excess employees in state enterprises. A special committee will also be appointed to probe salary concerns of government employees and state sector trade unions. More details on these now.
During the cabinet meeting this week, Approval was granted to amend the Samurdhi Act No. 1 of 2013 as provisioned by Divinaguma Amendment Act No. 2 of 2017. The National Audit Office will be included in the Samurdhi Act to audit the 1,127 Samurdhi community-based banks and Samurdhi community-based banking societies, which were only audited by the Internal Audit Division of the Samurdhi Development Department, as they are not formally recognized as banks because they do not fall under the purview of the central bank. Meanwhile, approval was also given to implement the compulsory retirement scheme in relation to the amalgamation of Ceylon Fertilizer Company Limited and Colombo Commercial Fertilizer Company Limited, as 267 employees have agreed to accept the compulsory retirement scheme. Accordingly, 844 million rupees will be spent from funds of the two fertilizer companies to execute the proposed scheme, subject to recommendations of a cabinet-appointed committee on the voluntary pension scheme for excess employees in state enterprises. In another decision, approval has been granted to publish the draft bills of the Anti-Dumping and Countervailing Duties Act No. 2 of 2018 and the Safeguard Measures Act No. 3 of 2018 in the Government Gazette and to submit both to Parliament for consent. The amendments are being introduced in parallel to the Economic Transformation Draft Bill, which was presented to Parliament last week. Also, the Cabinet decided to appoint a specialist committee to submit a report on concerns raised by employee groups and trade unions that have salary anomalies in the government service. Accordingly, anomalies are to be rectified by the 2025 budget subsequent to study in the committee report.
As heavy downpours and strong winds continue to affect the country, President Ranil Wickremesinghe issued directives to deliver immediate relief to those impacted by the extreme weather and to maintain relief support until the situation improves. Meanwhile, the Disaster Management Centre stated that the number affected due to the inclement weather saw a significant decline, with the total at 39,156 by this evening. The inclement weather, however, has claimed 8 lives so far.
Due to the active southwest monsoon conditions, 20 districts across Sri Lanka remain affected. The Disaster Management Centre said 39,156 people belonging to 10,483 families are affected owing to heavy downpours. 8 people were reported dead while another 19 people were injured. Subsequently, President Ranil Wickremesinghe directed officials to deliver immediate relief to those impacted by the inclement weather and to maintain relief efforts until the situation improves. The Disaster Management Centre is also taking steps to compensate those who lost their lives. Accordingly, the President has advised to grant a total of 250,000 rupees to families of the victims of the current adverse weather. Meanwhile, 2 fishermen of the Balapitiya Fisheries Harbour were killed, while another sustained injuries when their fishing trawler capsized amid strong winds. This comes in a backdrop where the Natural Hazards Early Warning Centre of the Met Department issued a red alert for strong winds and rough seas warning against venturing into the sea. As strong gusty winds coupled with the heavy rains are expected, the Met Department urges the fishing and naval communities to be attentive and not to venture into the sea until further notice. Further, several lowlands remain submerged as a result of torrential rains. Water levels of rivers Kalani, Kalu, Gin and Nilwala are on the rise and poses risks of potential flooding to the adjoining villages. According to the Department of Irrigation, the water capacity of the river Kuda, which is a tributary to the river Kalu, has risen at the Millakanda area to the level of a minor flood situation. The Met Department meanwhile forecasts heavy rains of above 100 mm in the western, Sabaragamuwa, central, northwestern and southern provinces during the next 24 hours. According to the National Building Research Organisation, 8 districts are still at risk of landslides.
The landslide early warning message has been extended to 16 p.m. tomorrow in the following areas. With that, warning level 2 alert temper warning was issued to Ratnamura district. Warning level 1 watch yellow warning was issued to Colombo district, Galle district, Gampaha district, Kalutara district, Kandy district, Kegol district, Morelli district, and Ratnamura.
General Secretary of the United National Party, Palitha Rangebandara, is of the view that government should postpone the upcoming presidential election and even the parliamentary election by 2 years to pave the way to solve the country's ongoing economic issues. However, this statement received a heavy backlash from various parties during the day. UNP member Minister Manusha Nanayakara said the government's stance is not to postpone elections, but parties are free to express their views. ITAC MP M.A. Sumantiran said this is an effort to suppress the country's democracy. Meanwhile, civil society organisation PAFRO said that measures will be taken to challenge before court any attempt to postpone the presidential elections.
Addressing media at the United National Party headquarters in Sirikota this morning, UNP General Secretary Palitharange Bandara commented on upcoming elections, drawing reactions from a number of parties later in the day.
The people of this country should select Ranil Wickremesinghe to overcome this difficult hurdle. We have to come out of bankruptcy and develop the country's economy. We have reached agreements with global financial institutions, including the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. If we breach any of these agreements, we might once again fall back to where we were in 2022. Are we going to fall into the same trap again or reach consensus and postpone the election? We are not saying this because the president is greedy to remain in power. This is our stance. Please do not waste time by holding a parliamentary election. Postpone both elections. Once the problems are solved during the next 2 years, elections can be held.
The Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna said that the parliamentary elections should be held. Does that mean it will take place as proposed by them? Palitharange Bandara represents the party of the president. The president is an independent person. The UNP is his party. The United National Party can make such a proposal. Once a proposal is made, it can be considered. However, it is not the stance of the government.
Now, this is an effort to totally deny the people of their sovereign right of franchise, to deny the country a democratic freedom. The country will no longer be considered a democracy. Parliament has lost its mandate 2 years ago when the Aragalaya took place. So we now have ruling arrangement where the chief executive of the country, the president, rules it without any mandate from the people, and for political support he has a parliament that has lost its mandate. Therefore, this effort to postpone further the 2 elections that will become due will draw protests from the people. That will be the final nail in the coffin of democracy in this country if such efforts are taken.
Meanwhile, the PAFRO organisation convening a media briefing this afternoon reacted to comments made by UNP General Secretary Palitharange Bandara.
යම් විදිහක වෙන උත්සාහයක් තියෙනවා නම් අපි PAFRO සංවිධානයේ හැටියට ඊටාම නිශ්චිතව අපි සඳහන් කරන්න කැමති අපි අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම මේ සම්බන්ධයෙන් අධිකරණයේ ඉදිරි අභියෝගයට ලක් කරනවා. ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදයට පටහැනි ජනතා මතය නොසලකා හරින නීතියක් සම්පාදනය කරන්න කිසිදු මහජන නියෝතයෙක් කටයුතු කරයි කියලා අපි විශ්වාස කරන්නේ නැහැ.
Opposition leader Sajith Premadasa assures to reintroduce the special interest scheme of 15% on fixed deposits for senior citizens that was terminated back in 2022. He made this claim while addressing the latest edition of the SJB's Sakwala program in Gampaha.
I asked the government, if the country's economy has recovered, why hasn't the 15% interest on fixed deposits for senior citizens been reinstated yet? I have voiced this in Parliament as well as outside Parliament. The last time I spoke about this in Parliament was on 25th of April. On that day, the Finance Minister agreed to implement it, but it has not been realised yet. I guarantee you that under Samagi Jana Balawegaya government, we will reinstate the special interest rate scheme for all senior citizens before the end of the year.
අපි ලබා දෙන්නට අනිවාර්යෙන්ම කටයුතු කරනවා කියන එක මම මේ අවස්ථාවේ ප්‍රකාශ කර සිටිනවා.
Several trade unions engaged in a protest this morning near the Parliament roundabout, claiming that the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna should object bills presented to Parliament with the aim of destroying the country. The trade union members later marched towards the SLPP head office in Battaramulla, where they were intercepted by police. However, with police and several SLPP members intervening, the protesters were dispersed. The government says the completion of the Northern Railway line cannot be expected by mid-June as earlier planned due to effects of the prevailing adverse weather and unexpected high costs. Reconstruction work on a stretch of 128 kilometers on the Northern Railway line from Maho to Anuradhapura began in January with $318 million allocated under the Indian credit line. Transport Minister Dr. Bandula Gunawardena said development of the railway line could be completed by August this year.
ණය යෝජනා ක්‍රමයේ යටතේ යාපනයේ ආශ්‍රිත දුංග මාර්ගයේ මේ වන විට සංවර්ධනය කරමින් පවතිනවා. අනවසර ඉදිරිකිරීමක් නිසා යම්කිසි අනවසර ඉදිරිකිරීමක් නිසා මෙම දුම්රිය සංවර්ධන කටයුතුට බාධා වෙලා තියෙනවා කියලා
මේ දිනවල ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙන විශාලම සංවර්ධන.
This is the biggest development project underway in the country. We expected to complete this upgrade on the closed section from Maho to Anuradhapura before the Poson-Poy holiday under the Indian Credit Line. We paid a visit to understand the cause of the delay. We informed all stakeholders that this is a national program and that some obstructions are delaying the completion of the project. The first is the delay due to the current weather. The second reason is the excess time and funds that are being allocated to construct the newly redesigned elephant passes in Galgamuwa and relevant areas. The third is the additional unexpected cost incurred when reconstructing railway lines that were constructed nearly a century ago. Because of these reasons, the engineers showed us that the upgrading cannot be completed by the Poson-Poy holiday in June and that it will take another 2 months' time. If there's illegal constructions happening around the railway line, the railway department has no problem in removing those. According to the Railway Act, constructions in the vicinity of the railway can be removed for the development of railways.
The Ceylon Electricity Board said it has divested 28% stake in LTL Holdings to West Coast Power Private Limited on February 7, 2024. LTL Holdings is the first subsidiary of the CEB and the former transformer maker unit of the CEB set up with the ABP Norway in the 1970s. Later, the stake of the foreign holding was sold to its management. Issuing a statement, CEB said that the stake has been divested for a consideration of 26 billion rupees. Accordingly, the divestment was completed for part settlement of outstanding on energy purchases from West Coast Power. The CEB said with the divestment, the CEB shareholding in LTL Holdings has decreased to 35%. Now, the Colombo Stock Exchange trading experienced a bearish sentiment today, and the all-share price index closed in red as a result of price losses in counties such as Hat National Bank, John Kew's Holdings and Commercial Bank. Turnover improved from yesterday's 4-month low to 915 million rupees today, however 61% lower than the monthly average of 2.4 billion. High net worth and institutional investor participation were noted in Sampath, National Development Bank and Allumex. Foreign participation in the market activity remained subdued, and foreigners closed as net buyers of 63.9 million rupees. Well, that wraps up tonight's edition of First at 9. We'll see you again tomorrow at the same time. I'm Indiveri Amwata. Good night.